Goodbye Guayaquil. That was probably the happiest goodbye I think we've ever done to a place. Although the depressing part was we'd have to fly back there in about a week's time anyway. But hey ho, it was off to the Galapagos. An amazing achievement, something that we didn't set out to do. But again, thanks to budgeting, etc., Argentinian pesos, we ended up being able to achieve it and to be able to go there. And it's going to be the first of 2 parts on the Galapagos Islands, because there are some hilarious stories coming up as well. But where are the Galapagos Islands? Well, they are west of Ecuador as such, of the mainland. It's a small archipelago. They're part of Ecuador as such. They're in the Pacific Ocean. They're relatively remote and isolated, approximately 600-700 miles to the west of the continent of South America. And the archipelago itself consists of 13 main islands and 6 smaller islets, or islets, however you say that word, as well. Most of it is the Galapagos National Park. It comprises about 95-96% of the landmass of the islands. Less than 1% of the islands is permanently inhabited by people, which is always good. And I can see why Darwin absolutely loved this place. It's a phenomenal place, and we knew it was going to be good anyway. But flying into the Galapagos airport, we noticed, and I can't remember exactly where this was, but we noticed that if you looked out to the left or the right, all you could see jumping in and out of the water, and again, no word of a lie, as far as the eye could see, all you could see were manta rays in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. That was cool. That was really cool, just to see that, and they're huge. Even from a plane, as we were heading down to land, they were absolutely ginormous. Now, as with most things, doing Galapagos on a budget, not necessarily ideal. We weren't able to go and see, for example, Darwin's Arch, which no longer exists because of erosion. It actually fell into the ocean not so long ago. But doing it on a budget, again, yeah, not ideal, but there was good enough fun to be had there. We checked into our hostel after getting off the plane and paying a £100 tourist fee, $100 tourist fee. We ended up in Puerto Ayora, stayed there for a couple of nights in the hostel, and that's where we were speaking to the owner of the hostel and trying to work out the best plan. Now, there's a few main islands, as I said, but in order to get boats between the islands, like commercial boats between the islands, you've got Isla Isabela, Isla Santa Cruz, which is where we were, and then Isla de San Cristobal. And we worked it out that what we could do is, not on the day we arrived, but this is what the lady at the hostel advised us. She said, well, you can get a boat over to the Isla Isabela for a couple of nights, then get the boat back to Isla Santa Cruz in the morning, wait in Isla Santa Cruz for a few hours, go back, then go to Isla de San Cristobal, stay there for a couple of nights, then come back again to Isla Santa Cruz, stay here for one more night, and then get the plane the following day. She said you'll see an awful lot. The boats take about 2.5 hours between each island. You could fly on private plane, but that was way too much. So she advised that was a thing to do. So that's exactly what we did. We spent that afternoon booking up our accommodation, having a walk around the little town of Puerto Ayora, and that's where the first fun incident happened. So we were at near the Parque de San Francisco. We were having a look round, and we knew there's a fish market right next to it. The fish market was there. The guy was busy chopping up everything he was doing, and there was always a seal. As we were told, the same seal would come up. He knew when feeding time was, because he knew when the fisherman chucked out his drags as such. And then out of nowhere, a pelican turns up. Now, if you've never seen a pelican before, they're pretty mean looking things. The size of their beak is pretty big. They're not to be messed with. And we tried getting a photo with said pelican. Aaron was quite sensible. Aaron stood quite further away, got a little photo with the pelican in the background and the seal. Happy days. Me being me, I didn't want to get too close to the pelican. We're in the Galapagos. You're there to respect nature, admire it, not get too involved in it. But in my quest of getting within good camera shot of the pelican, what I was accidentally doing was I was going too near the fish. I was going too near the fisherman. I was going too near to the fish. That startled the pelican somewhat, who then proceeded to start flapping its wings and chase after me down the road. Still maintained to this day, the sight of me bombing it down the road, being chased by a pelican, is probably comedy gold. And also, Aaron and myself maintain, in my lifetime, I have never moved faster. In my life. Never, ever, ever have I moved faster in my life than when I was on the Isla Santa Cruz in the Galapagos, being chased by a pelican because I was supposedly eyeing up his dinner. Fun times. Other things to get used to that took a bit of time to get used to are the fact that you just be walking around and there's literally animals everywhere. Again, your seals, bloody pelicans. It's still don't like pelicans to this day, actually. Dangerous bastards. Pelicans, iguanas. Just walking across the street. You have to be extra careful when you're walking. Also, when you're driving, if you're driving around there as well. Loads of different things to get used to. That evening, we just enjoyed a meal in one of the local shacks. Fresh seafood, surprise, and they were good times. The following day, we decided to go to a giant tortoise reserve. Again, we were following Lonely Planet. We knew where we needed to go. We needed to go to El Chato, which is a giant tortoise reserve. The Lonely Planet was almost adamant that there'd be public transport to get there. We weren't sure, but we tried following it anyway. Went to the main road, waited for about 20 minutes, decided that there was going to be no bus to this reserve. Maybe that's a bit of naivety on our behalf, I don't know. And then went back into town, organised a guided tour for the day. Got it for about $35, which, again, given where we were, what we were doing, we hadn't necessarily budgeted for it, but we decided, it's a bit stupid to be here than not to go and see giant tortoises. And we headed up to the reserve, El Chato. Thankfully, our Spanish was very good by this stage. So the conversation we had with the cab driver, who doubled up as a tour guide, very informative, very useful. We understood probably about 80% of what he was saying. And we went for a walk around this giant tortoise reserve for a couple of hours. We were following in his footsteps. We were, meandering around, looking at all the exciting things, looking at giant tortoise poo, as you do. Looking at their tracks, where they're going. Believe it or not, despite their size, they are quite difficult to spot, especially when they're in the foliage and fauna and surrounded by greenery. It's quite difficult to spot them in their natural camouflage. But that being said, after a little while of meandering around and learning a lot more about giant tortoises, we came across one. Now, I've had this conversation with many people before. When they say, well, how big can a giant tortoise possibly be? Can't be that big. My friends, fucking huge. It's in the name. They are massive. Absolutely massive. They can get a bit of a shift on as well. Not going to lie. I mean, not exactly zooming at 100 miles per hour, but they can get a bit of a shift on given their size. I mean, these things can live up to a couple of 100 years old if necessary. They're incredible creatures. Now, of course, what we liked about the tour guide, and we'd heard rumours about this in the Galapagos. Some tour guides, get up close and personal with the animals for no reason. Our tour guide was very well reserved, very respective of the tortoises, and so were we as a result of that. And we felt that was a great approach to have. You see all these photos of people like, I don't know, sitting on a tortoise or, these sorts of things. Not very pleasant. I'm not a massive nature lover myself. I hold my hands up to that. I'm not a great animal person. But to see these giant tortoises in the flesh, I think you should have a bit of respect for them. Anyway, I'll get off that little eco high horse. These things are absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. They look quite lazy, but they do shift around quite a bit as well. We were following one for about half an hour. It was just, trundling around. But it turns out, on a side note, I watched a recent video, tortoises hunt. There was a video, I think it was in the Seychelles. And it's the first ever known recording of a giant tortoise hunting. It basically snapped this neck of a bird and ate it. You don't see all of that on the video, but you do see it kill the bird, which is incredibly entertaining because I don't think anyone thought that tortoises would do that, but they do. Interesting stuff. So we had great fun on the tortoise reserve there. one of the fun things that we could do at the end, and they had a little museum at the end of the reserve, which was cool, giving a history about the giant tortoises, different types, different species, etc. There was an empty giant tortoise shell that you could get in, little sort of pose for a photo type thing. Remarkably, absolutely remarkably, and I'm not the smallest person in the world, I think I could have got about 4 of me inside that shell. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I can sit here and give you all the words and all the superlatives as I try to do on the travel podcast episodes, yet sometimes words just won't do these things justice. Google it. These things are absolutely massive. And they're incredibly entertaining to watch as well. Probably why I want to end up getting a tortoise at some point. Possibly not a giant one, because you need a lot of outdoor space, I think, for it. But yeah, I love tortoises. Absolutely brilliant creatures. By the way, if you touch a tortoise, do wash your hands afterwards, because they are a natural carrier of salmonella. Fun fact for you. Tortoise reserve done. We headed back into town, and we couldn't quite believe what we saw when we got back. We'd been told of a street where you could go down and get fresh lobster. I shit you not, for $4. I think any food that you have to use a hammer to get into is pretty good at the best of times. We went down to the road to get fresh lobster, and who do we bump into? We bumped into Mark and Jess. Yeah, the same Mark and Jess from Buenos Aires, the same Mark and Jess from Cusco, happened to be in the Galapagos at the exact same time as we were. We couldn't quite believe it when we all saw each other. I think there's a few swear words of surprise given out by all of us. I couldn't quite believe it, and we all nestled down and basically ate lobster for the evening and had a couple of beers. And yeah, fresh lobster, $4, couple of beers at $1 each. Absolutely wonderful. Probably the 3 best words in the Spanish language: menu del dia, menu of the day. Absolute genius. If you're ever around in Latin America, do take advantage of a menu del dia. You're going to get a very filling 2-3 course meal, and it's going to be relatively inexpensive. So I do recommend you take advantage of that. After having a few beers with Mark and Jess, we sort of outlined the plans that we had for the Galapagos. It turned out they were on a budget too. So we all agreed to do the same trips, basically. They'd only just arrived, so we let them be for the evening, and then we walked down to the Galapagos beach at Tortuga Bay, done some snorkeling, bits and bobs like that. Saw loads of different, I guess geckos and different, iguanas, lizards, all these sorts of things, just crawling around on the beach, having a good old laugh. So we had a good walk around there. Other thing we did whilst on the first island, Santa Cruz, we popped off and went to the Charles Darwin Scientific Station. That's almost like, I want to say nature reserve. That's probably not the best way to describe it, given most of the islands and nature reserves. But it was just the Charles Darwin Scientific Station, research station, and they had very rare animals in there. I think there was the Galapagos iguana, which I believe is bright orange. A wonderful thing to see. They were breeding them to get them repopulated, to put them back, out into the wild. We also had lobster again the following day, because we had to. And that's pretty much part 1 of the Galapagos. We've landed. We've landed or ended up in Isla Santa Cruz, the main island. We've been given our instructions for what to do for our week here. We knew what we had to do. We knew where we were going to go. It was just a case of enjoying everything as we could. And we knew that we'd head off to the Isla Isabela, where we would do a couple of boat tours when we were there. And that's where we're going to pick up on the next episode, part 2 of the Galapagos. Join us when we go to Isla Isabela and the Isla de San Cristobal. Hasta luego.